The stars were silent when Earth died, not with fire, not with honor, but with deletion. The Zephyrian Concordat, first of the galactic powers, descended not to conquer, but to erase. Their fleets didn't bomb cities. They struck libraries, data centers, graves. They sterilized memory, generational continuity, cultural bedrock, species identity, all scrubbed in a matter of days. Earth itself was left a husk, geologically intact, psychologically annihilated. Primitive mammals. They stored everything in one place. How quaint! Arch-Seer Valexis, Supreme Archivist, Zephyrian Empire. The Concordat called it cleansing compliance, an act of mercy, they claimed. No blood, no resistance, just strategic nullification. But they misunderstood something. They thought memory made us human. They forgot what happens when you steal it. 17 years later. Out past the Perseus Reach, in the shattered hull of a mining frigate, a man with scars across half his skull studied a dying map. His fingers, calloused and burned, traced the blinking dots of forgotten outposts, each one silent. Each one a ghost. Name, Cale Varn. Rank, none. Crimes, not listed. Threat level, variable. Cale had no family left. No home. But in his bones, there was something older than memory. A reason to hate. He spoke little. When he did, people listened. When he fought, people followed. A young Oran mechanic, four-eyed, furred, naive, whispered across the comms, "They found us. They're coming." Cale didn't blink. "They always come." The ship around them groaned. Motion sensors blinked red. Zephyrian retrieval units, silver-skinned, emotionless, clinically cruel, pierced the void with surgical precision. Not to kill, not to capture, to disassemble anything that looked human. There were 7 in the crew. 2 were already gone, vaporized by precision stings. The youngest, a boy no older than 15, gripped a plasma cutter like it was his only lifeline. Cale pulled his sidearm, not standard issue, ancient, cracked, and ugly. A human relic, the kind you'd bury with rage instead of bullets. "Run if you want," he said quietly. "But if you stay, aim for the eyes." They don't blink. They made a stand in the lower decks. Cale moved like a ghost through the shadows, counting steps, angles, weaknesses. The Zephyrian tech was clean, precise, and lethal. Humanity fought dirty. A coolant pipe burst on his signal, flooding the deck in freezing vapor. The first retrieval unit stepped through and slipped. Cale's blade was in its throat before it could adjust its gait. It didn't bleed, but the sound it made, a high-pitched warble almost, surprised, told him enough. They didn't expect resistance, not here, not now, not from them. The Oran screamed as another silver soldier grabbed him. The mechanic's cries turned to choking gasps. Cale moved, fast and brutal. 2 shots, both to the same optic node. The thing dropped. The Oran stared at him in stunned silence. "You're not even military," the mechanic rasped. Cale looked at him. No one left is. When the smoke cleared, 5 Zephyrians lay in pieces. The last 2 retreated, recording data with emotionless precision. The crew, bleeding and dazed, huddled in the dark. But Cale wasn't looking at them. He was watching the blinking light in the floor panel. A hidden cache, long buried. It wasn't tech. It wasn't weaponry. It was a piece of history. Real, unscanned, unaltered. Old Earth script etched into stone. The Oran leaned over his shoulder. "What is it?" Cale didn't answer. His hands trembled as he touched it. It was a name, carved in rage. A list. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Each one followed by a time, a place. Coordinates. Not where humans died, where they fought back. Then the light shifted. A second signal. Deeper, colder, Zephyrian tech, buried beneath the cache. And it was waking up. The light from the cache pulsed like a heartbeat. Faint but urgent, Kale crouched in the crawl space, breathing slow, every movement deliberate. Behind the stone slab, in a compartment no broader than a fist, sat a black obelisk no larger than a thumb. Smooth, seamless, unreadable, not human, not Zephyrian. Older. The Auran mechanic hovered behind him, eyes wide. "That's not Concordat. Not even close." Kale didn't respond. He was already lifting it. For a second, just one, his pupils dilated and the room went still. Then the screams started. Not from the room. Not from the crew, from the obelisk. They were not sonic. Not audible. But they pierced. Kyle staggered back. The crew saw it. His breath hitched, his scarred jaw clenched, his eyes glassed over like a man drowning in memory. Blood ran from his nose. The artifact sang of fire and betrayal, and names burned into the walls of time. He dropped it. But it didn't fall. It floated, hovering in place like it had simply decided gravity was optional. Then it opened, not like a hatch. Like a wound. From inside spilled images. Flickering, half-corrupted, charred planets, storm-lit ruins, flashes of battles that hadn't been fought yet, and then came the list. Real. Raw. Old Earth glyphs, etched by hand, 42 names, whispered the Auran. And those coordinates, they span the galaxy. Kale didn't need translation. They weren't leaders. They weren't soldiers. They were Avengers. Every name came with a mark. Every mark with a date. Every date followed by a death, and at the bottom, carved in the jagged, furious hand of a dying species. If memory is a weapon, let them choke on it. The Auran's voice cracked. What is this? Kale stood slowly. The blood had stopped. His hands were steady again. "It's not a list of heroes," he said. "It's a kill order." 5 hours later, the frigate's reactor was stripped. The crew, what remained of it, had orders. Not commands. Not military directives. Instructions. Raw and quiet. Splinter routes. Decoy beacons. Burial of the artifact in deep void drop sites. No contact until the signal. Kale took only one thing with him. The first name. Therion Hask, a Zephyrion general. Architect of the Archive Burn. Currently stationed on Elisk Thorn, a pleasure moon wrapped in luxury and death. Kale stole a jump ship. Didn't ask permission, just left. The crew didn't stop him, because he moved like something that didn't come back. Elisk Thorn was everything Earth wasn't. Gilded, indulgent, safe. Zephyrian aristocrats sipped memory wine distilled from human emotional residue, a trophy from the Archive Wars. Kale entered the surface city with a stolen pass, one of thousands of faceless laborers scrubbing the waste of empire. No weapons, no armor, just grease-stained coveralls and the weight of a name. Therion Hask held court in a glass spire above the clouds, surrounded by concubines, art, and false serenity. He hadn't been in a battle in 20 years. He thought he'd won. Kyle didn't. Knock. He didn't speak. The guard on the entrance collapsed before he could draw his arc staff. His throat shattered by a pressure wrench Kale had lifted from the boiler decks. 2 minutes. 3 dead. No alarms. Hask was alone. The door to the sanctum hissed open, and for a brief second, the general looked amused. "You must be a very stupid thief," he said. Kale stepped forward. Hask's expression shifted. There was something in Kale's eyes. Not fury, not even hate, just certainty. "You're one of them," Hask whispered. "You survived the burn." Kale said nothing. He reached into his coat and pulled out something cold, dark, and humming with potential. The obelisk fragment. Hask's eyes went wide. "That tech is... that's not yours. You don't know what you're..." Kale activated it. The room lit with symbols, memories, screams, the smell of burned books, children's shoes buried in ash, holograms melting under erasure fields, and a name. Therion. Hask, date of sentence, 10/224 SE punishment. Erasure, Kale pulled the trigger, not on a gun. On the obelisk, Hask began to shake. His veins darkened. His flesh split like overripe fruit, unraveling not just physically but existentially, like the universe was deleting him back. He didn't scream. He couldn't. There was nothing left to make sound. When it was over, there was only dust and Kale standing in a memory room, now empty. He looked down at the obelisk and saw the list update. Therion's name faded, and the next name blinked into focus. Kale Varn. Then, in smaller glyphs below it, designation, Igniter. The obelisk chirped once. A new signal had been sent, not to humans, to every empire in the galaxy. A declaration. The past is not dead. It hunts. The Zephyrian Concordat hadn't suffered a casualty of rank in over 600 years. When General Therion Hask vanished from existence. Not killed, not assassinated, but erased. It was not treated as loss. It was treated as contamination. The Citadel Tower on Zephyrian Prime shimmered in perpetual daylight. Architects of reality, they called themselves. Makers of peace through precise annihilation. At the center of the tower sat the High Conclave. 8. Minds fused into one voice. They reviewed the signal. A single name burned across their internal. Grid, Kale Varn. A remnant, said one. Voice. A mistake, said another. A disease, whispered the rest. They replayed the footage. Obelisk activation. Forbidden pattern. Unlicensed waveform, and then, worse, the erasure vector. Not biological. Not technological. Not concordate. Something older. Buried beneath even their own origins, the decision came without debate. Protocol. 7. Galactic pathogen response. Purge the region. Torch the space lanes. Salt the remains. Humanity had its time. This will be the final deletion. Kale didn't know. He was already on the move. The obelisk, now embedded in his spine, pulsed with cryptic signals. It wasn't pain. Not quite. But it felt like remembering something you never lived. Like every nerve in his body was haunted by someone else's rage. He'd become something more than a man, but less than human. In the refugee slums orbiting Halvarun 9, Kale hunted the second name, Eris Marrow. Zephyrian biostrategist. The mind behind the grief spires, devices used during the archive burn to simulate the mourning process and accelerate societal collapse. She was a ghost now. Protected. Hidden. Rumors said she lived in the spires still, feeding off the echoes. The obelisk knew the way. The crew from the mining frigate had gone to ground, scattered across the void, delivering fragments of the list, rebuilding forgotten roots, smuggling slivers of humanity into alien memory banks. Kale worked alone. Because the closer he got to the names, the more the artifact changed him. His dreams were no longer his. He remembered cities that didn't exist, families he never knew, sunsets on Earth from 5,000 years ago. He bled the past. The spire on Halvarun 9 towered like a broken fang, shrouded in electrical storms and psionic static. Inside, the walls screamed. Not metaphor, not exaggeration. Literal screams. Echoes of billions fed into the stone, looping endlessly. A masterpiece of grief weaponized. Kale moved through it silently. He didn't flinch. He didn't tremble. He remembered. You shouldn't have come here. The voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. Eris Marrow stepped out from the shadow of a grief altar, tall, serpentine, her skin glowing with data streams. Her eyes weren't eyes anymore, just endless flickers of neural fire. You are Kale, she said slowly. The ember that wouldn't die. Kale raised the obelisk. Marrow smiled. I knew you would come. They all said you wouldn't. They said humans forget. But she stepped closer. You don't forget. You just bury things, and when they dig back up, her smile twisted. You burn. He activated the obelisk. The screams stopped. All of them. Marrow's eyes widened. You're not just activating it, you're feeding it. He didn't respond. He couldn't. Not while the memories were pouring in. Every child who died screaming. Every story lost to fire. Every soldier who knelt before the erasure fields and wept. He wasn't just the igniter. He was the carrier. And the obelisk was no longer a weapon. It was a wound in time. Kale stepped forward. Eris Marrow, he said, voice cracked and low. By the old names, by the ashes of earth. You are judged. He touched the obelisk to her forehead, and she laughed. You still don't understand, she whispered. You think this was all ours? She grinned. I only copied the design. The obelisk flared, and she was gone. Another name erased, another echo silenced, but her words stayed. Kale stood alone in the spire, surrounded by silence for the first time. And then, something deeper stirred, not from the obelisk, from the foundation of the spire itself. Stone peeled away, a chamber revealed. Inside, not Zephyrian, not human, a message older than the war, older than the stars, written in earth tongue. We warned them. Kale's breath caught. The obelisk pulsed once. A new glyph appeared in his mind. Not a name, a place. Sector 0, the origin of the archive burn. Something had lied. They told the galaxy that Sector 0 didn't exist, a myth, a cartographic glitch, a void without stars. Even the Concordate's own maps ended at the edge of it, an official blank space marked only with 2 words, non-viable. But when Kale fed the glyph into his ship's cracked nav core, the system didn't reject it. It opened, and something old answered back. No words, just a frequency, low, bone-deep, and impossibly far away. Kale's eyes blurred, his chest tightened, not a warning, a summons. He left Halvaroon 9 without speaking to the crew. He didn't need to. By now, the galaxy was starting to burn. Therion, Hask, erased, Eras. Marrow, erased, and the signals had been intercepted. The Zephyrian Concordat no longer doubted. They no longer dismissed. They feared. On Zephyrian Prime, inside a vault that hadn't been opened in 1,000 years, the High Conclave gathered around a prison of crystal. Inside, something pulsed. It wasn't alive, not quite, but it dreamed. They had buried it after the First Archive War, not because it was dangerous, but because it had told them the truth. You are not the first to cleanse. You are not the first to burn the past. And every time, something crawls back out. The voices of the conclave buzzed like locusts. The igniter heads for the source. Sector 0 must remain sealed. Release the cinders. 10 vessels launched before the sun rose. Not ships. Not soldiers, annihilators, designed for one thing, to silence history permanently. Kale's jump ship arrived at the edge of Sector 0 3 days later. The stars ended, literally. No ambient radiation, no gravity trails, no data. Just a black curtain, eating light. The obelisk in his spine hummed louder, not painful, almost eager. He stepped forward in the cockpit. Let's see who they buried. He crossed into the dark. Space inside Sector 0 did not behave. His ship warped, bent, shivered. Instruments died. Time bent sideways. He saw flashes. Earth, not Earth. A million versions of it. Burned, buried, broken. He was no longer alone in his mind. Voices whispered, but they weren't alien. They were human, different accents, different centuries, all saying the same thing. They took everything, but not enough. Then, a shape appeared, massive, monolithic, A station? No. A mausoleum. Carved into an asteroid the size of a moon, covered in symbols both human and older. The ship began to drift toward it, pulled by invisible forces. Kyle led it. He docked in silence. No lights, no airlocks, just a breathless welcome. The inside of the station was a cathedral of the forgotten. Walls covered in carvings, names etched with fire and grief. Thousands. Cale walked slowly, touching each mark. They weren't warriors. They weren't kings. They were witnesses. We lived. They erased us, but we remembered. At the center of the mausoleum stood a massive throne of black stone. Empty, until Cale approached. Then, light. A projection burst to life, holographic, flickering, ancient. A human face, old, scarred, calm. She looked directly at Cale and spoke, her voice like broken glass on fire. "You found it. You weren't supposed to. But if you're hearing this, then the archive war never ended." Cale froze. The face leaned forward. "We started this. Humanity. Long before the Concordat. We were the first to burn the records, the first to silence civilizations, the first to call it peace." And something in the dark watched. The projection began to unravel. But not before one final line. "You are not vengeance, you are penance." Cale staggered. The obelisk pulsed once, then screamed. Pain exploded across his spine, every nerve alight with fire. Visions flooded him. Not memories. Not his. Burning temples. Screaming suns. Children dragged from memory tombs. Earth, not as victim, but as executioner. The truth hit like a blade. Humanity started the archive burn, not the Concordat. Cale collapsed to the floor, and the station spoke, with no voice, just meaning. "Now you must choose. Burn them all, or save what remains." Behind him, a new signal lit up on his ship. The cinders had arrived. Cale didn't run. He crawled. His spine was on fire, every nerve blistering from the obelisk's awakening. The mausoleum station around him pulsed like a living heart, walls vibrating with whispers, names glowing red-hot, grief turning physical. Behind him, the cinders dropped into real space. No warning, no conversation, just arrival, like gravity folding in on itself. They weren't Concordat ships. They were purity vessels, sentient crucibles wrapped in machine flesh, designed not to fight, but to erase entire bloodlines. No weapons, no targeting systems, just impact. Where they struck, civilizations ceased to exist genetically. Not a single strand of DNA left behind. Cale dragged himself to the dock. His vision blurred. His hands shook, but he moved because he had to. Because the obelisk was changing him. His skin had begun to crack, not with wounds, but with language. Symbols etched themselves into his flesh, glowing faintly as if his body was being rewritten. In the reflection of the ship's cockpit, he barely recognized himself. A human still, but not a man. A messenger. The mausoleum detached him silently. No resistance. No demand. It had shown him the truth. Now it would watch. As Cale's ship burned toward escape velocity, the first cinder twisted space behind him. It did not fire. It remembered him, Cale Varn. Designation, igniter. Status, contaminated. It accelerated. Silent, perfect, final. Cale's ship shook. The hull screamed. Alarms failed. He pulled the throttle anyway. Sector 0 tore around him, glitching through realities, skies, flickering between Earth and not Earth, moons bleeding, stars whispering through shattered physics. The cinder caught him, just as the obelisk pulsed again, and something inside Cale spoke. Not yet. Time stopped, literally Kale floated in a moment so dense it bent photons. The cinder was frozen in place, meters from impact. Its surface twitched, confused. It tried to calculate, adjust course. Then it screamed, an inhuman wail through quantum bandwidths. Kale was no longer transmitting a signal. He was the signal, and the obelisk, now fully awake, activated a buried command. Penance Protocol. Engaged. The universe blinked. Kyle was no longer in his ship. He stood in darkness. Not a void. A chamber. Alive. Before him, a wall. Not stone, not metal. Memories, layered over each other. Flickering. Every archive burn. Every erasure. Every forgotten people. He saw himself in all of them. Not as a savior. Not as a killer. As a witness. Then the wall shifted, forming a shape, a figure. Human. Old armor. Burned insignia. One arm missing. The ghost spoke. "You are not vengeance," Kyle whispered back, barely able to breathe. "Then what am I?" The ghost didn't answer. It only pointed. A new wall formed. Not memories. Names. His list. All of it, still incomplete. 3 names erased, dozens left. But now, a new path flickered alongside it. A choice. Complete the list. Or upload the obelisk into the Concordat coronet. Infect their memory code. Collapse their archive network from inside. One path. Revenge. The other. Extinction. The ghost spoke once more. "They will come for you, Kale. The Concordat, the survivors, the forgotten, even the humans who remained loyal to silence. You're not the last flame. You're the match." The vision ended. Kale slammed back into reality, gasping. His ship had been flung clear of Sector 0. The cinder, gone. No wreckage, no signal. Deleted, like it never existed. But something remained in the void. A single word, burning across his nav screen. Decide. Kale limped to the medkit. Bandaged what he could. Injected painkillers. Stared at the next coordinate. His ship's AI, fragmented, damaged, barely functional, spoke for the first time in days. "You are being tracked by 17 Concordat vessels. 6 planetary defense grids have reactivated. The bounty on your existence has reached a galactic record. Suggested action. Surrender." Kyle smiled. Just once, then turned it off. Because on the edge of the nav screen, a new signal blinked. One the Concordat didn't know about. A human colony. Forgotten. Hidden. Still alive. Not part of the list. Not targets. Options. But as he plotted a course, a new alert came through, cutting through all encryption. A voice. Human. Rough. Familiar. Kale. If you're hearing this, you're not the only one with the list. He froze. The voice continued. "Some of us didn't wait for judgment. We became it, and we've started the burn again. With or without you." A second list began to upload. Same names, but a different order. At the top, Kyle Varn. The transmission looped twice before Kale accepted it was real. His own name, at the top of the kill list. Not from the Concordat, from humans. The voice had been unmistakable. Rough, scarred by time and trauma, a name he hadn't heard since before the Burnrel Corin. Once a soldier, once a brother. Now, apparently, a rebel executioner. Kale sat in silence. Outside, stars bled red across the void. The obelisk inside him had cooled, but not gone silent. It pulsed now in patterns. Half language, half warning. The list wasn't just a weapon. It was a test. And Kale had failed it. Or passed it. He wasn't sure which anymore. The forgotten colony blinked in the dark ahead. Glisa 1212. A rogue station hidden in the gravitational shadow of a brown dwarf. Not on any concordant records, not on the obelisk's map either. But someone had sent the signal, and Cale needed to know how deep the fire ran. He docked in silence. No welcome crew, no defense grid, just the cold taste of human breath in stale recycled air, and a lingering silence that made his skin crawl. The station wasn't abandoned. It was hunting him. Kyle stepped into the corridor. Power was still running, but lights were low. Everything was angled wrong. Not broken, tilted, as if the station itself had shifted in its orbit but refused to acknowledge it. His boots echoed. Every camera followed him, but no one spoke. Then, a door hissed open at the end of the corridor, and Rel Koran stepped out. Same sharp eyes, same scar down the left cheek. But his body was different now. Augmented, heavier, built for execution, not war. Cale didn't raise a weapon. Neither did Rel. "You really should have died with the rest of us." Cale's voice cracked like gravel. "You have the list." Rel nodded. "Piece of it." He stepped closer. His eyes flickered, tracking Cale's breathing, stance, everything. "You're what they made you. Igniter, right? Penance, vengeance, memory virus. I don't care what name it goes by now." He smiled, cruel and tired. But the mistake was giving you choice. Kyle didn't move. "You're burning too slow, Cale," Rel said. "Still believing in targets, in justice, in rules." "There are no rules. Not anymore." They erased the book. Cale finally spoke. Quiet. Sharp. "You put my name at the top." Rel's smile faded. "Yeah, because you're hesitation incarnate. Because you're still looking for a way to save something. And that," he pointed at Cale's spine, "that obelisk, it feels your doubt." Silence stretched. Then Rel sighed. "Come with me. Let's finish it the right way." Cale stared at him. "You want genocide." Rel didn't blink. "I want permanence." The tension broke fast. Cale moved, but Rel had already drawn. A low-charge kinetic spike hissed through the air, cracking Cale across the ribs, flipping him sideways into the wall. Another shot, this one aimed at his head. Cale dropped low, grabbed a loose power conduit, and jammed it upward as Rel closed in. Sparks sprayed. Rel's augment shorted just long enough. Cale drove a knee into his side, followed by two brutal elbows. Rel snarled. His left arm shifted, splitting open to reveal a plasma spike. Should have stayed a ghost. Cale blocked the strike, barely, but the spike grazed his shoulder. His coat caught fire. The obelisk screamed inside him. Cale reached for it, and the room exploded with memory. Both men were thrown apart. Images crashed into them. Flash floods of grief and rage and burning skies. Cale on his knees. Rel stumbling, blinded by what the obelisk had shown him. For Cale, every time he hesitated, someone died. For Rel, every person he'd already erased whispered from the dark. It was Cale who stood first. Bleeding, bruised, but standing. "You saw them," he said. Rel's eyes were wide, his mouth trembled, but his voice was steady. "I did." He lifted a detonator. "And I still choose fire." The station's core began to hum. A failsafe. A collapse trigger. The whole colony was wired. Rel backed into the shadows, bleeding from the mouth but smiling. Better a graveyard than another archive. The doors slammed shut behind him. Cale ran. Smoke choked the hallways. Lights flickered. Gravity spasmed. The station screamed. He barely reached the ship in time, launched on vapor and fire. Behind him, the colony went nova. No data survived, no people, no answers, just flame. In deep space, Cale sat in silence. The obelisk glowed faintly. A new name appeared on the list. It wasn't Zephyrian. It wasn't alien. It was human. Rel Koran. The silence in Cale's ship was heavier than any battlefield roar. Outside, space was a cold graveyard of shattered stars and dead dreams. But inside, the war was far more brutal. Because the enemy wasn't just the Concordat anymore. It was humanity itself. Cale's fingers hovered over the console, tracing the names bleeding into the obelisk's glowing map. Each one a ghost, a traitor, a target. The line between ally and enemy dissolved like ash in the void. The message from Rel had fractured more than Cale's world. It had shattered every fragile hope for unity. The uneasy coalition of species he'd once fought beside was now fractured. Tensions flared in the cold chambers of the Harrowwind. The Icardat flagship where Cale's last allies debated in whispered urgency. Sariax, the reptilian tactician, hissed quietly to Cale as they surveyed the flickering holomap. "You hunt your own." Cale's jaw tightened. Better to kill the firestarter than the flame. Beside him, Jera, a bioluminescent empath from the Tikali, shifted uneasily. "But burning brothers will consume us all." "The question is," Sariax growled, "who deserves to be saved?" That question echoed like a jagged knife through the council chambers. Cale knew the answer was not simple. The obelisk was no longer a tool. It was a judge, and it was writing humanity's fate in blood. One voice rose above the discord, a human. Sira, a former archivist turned resistance leader, spoke with quiet fire. "We can't lose ourselves now. We are the story's last chance, not the executioners." Her eyes locked on Kyle. "You carry the burden, but we carry the future." Kyle nodded. Her words were a balm and a brand. But the moment shattered when a sudden alert screamed through the ship. A boarding party. Silent, swift, not Concordat, not Rel's faction, something else, something darker. The first to fall was the communications officer, a single, precise strike to the neck, no sound, no struggle, just a corpse collapsing into the dim corridor. Kyle's heart thundered. This was no ordinary attack. He moved through the corridors like a shadow, breath held tight. The attackers were cloaked in ancient armor, weapons humming with a strange energy that bent light around them. They struck without warning, ghost-like. Cale found the bridge breached, the holomap flickered, signals scrambled. "Sabotage," Jera whispered behind him. "Who?" Cale asked. "No signature we recognize, no language, no code. They were ghosts, intruders with no origin," and the obelisk thrummed angrily. "They're here for the obelisk," Cale growled. "They want to end the burn." The battle was brutal and close. Metal screamed against bone. Cale fought side by side with Sariax and Jera, but every victory was Pyrrhic. The intruders pulled back before the Harrowwind could bring full firepower to bear. Vanished, leaving only broken bodies and unanswered questions. Cale stared at the flickering holomap. The obelisk's glow dimmed. A new word etched itself across the map. Sacrament. A whisper echoed in Cale's mind. "You are no longer the igniter," the voice said, cold, ancient. "You are the sacrament. The price, the reckoning." Cale's hand clenched the console. The line between savior and sinner had blurred beyond repair. Outside, distant stars blinked, and the galaxy waited, because the firestarter was no longer just fighting aliens. He was fighting everything. The word burned in Cale's mind like acid, a sacrament, not a title, not a weapon, a burden, something old, something forgotten. His ship cut through the darkness toward the source of the intruders. A dead system, orphaned worlds circling a black hole's ghost. The Harrowwind's engines hummed, a fragile pulse against the crushing void. Sariax stood at his side, eyes narrowed, claws tapping on the console. "This place. It's a tomb." Jera's glow dimmed as she whispered. "The sacrament is a ritual, not just a curse." Cale's voice was low. "Then what's the offering?" The black hole's shadow stretched across the ship's hull as they entered orbit. No signs of life, no wreckage, only silence. Then the ghost came, not in flesh, not in metal, but in the ship's AI fragments of voice, ancient and distorted. You carry the penance, but you are not yet free. The sacrament demands blood, or oblivion. The words chilled Cale deeper than any concordat toxin. A sudden explosion rocked the ship. Shields flared. The intruders had returned, this time with purpose, but it was no longer about theft or sabotage. It was a ceremony. They were here to bind, to seal, and Cale faced them in the breach. Figures, cloaked in shifting shadows, faces hidden behind masks that seemed to swallow light. The lead stepped forward. Its voice was not alien. It was older. You do not understand what you carry. Igniter. The obelisk is not a weapon. It is a covenant. Cale tightened his grip on his rifle. I carry survival. The figure's laughter was dry, brittle. Survival demands sacrifice. The sacrament is blood paid to stars that remember. In the chaos, Cale caught a glimpse of the truth, fragments of data streaming through the obelisk. Not just history, not just revenge. A ledger. Every erased species, every burned world, every debt owed, and the obelisk was the collector. Cale staggered back. Why me? The figure's mask seemed to smile, because humanity did not break. Because you remember. Because you are the reckoning. Cale's breath hitched. He felt the obelisk's cold fingers tracing his spine, changing him, making him more, less, neither alive nor dead. Suddenly, alarms screamed. The intruders surged forward. Cale fired with desperate precision. Every shot was a scream, every breath a curse. But the battle was not his to win. The obelisk flared. A blinding pulse radiated outward, tearing through ship and enemy alike. When light faded, only Cale remained. The sacrament had been paid, but the cost was yet to be counted. Cale collapsed against the console, chest heaving, his voice barely a whisper. What now? The obelisk glowed softly, and a single phrase echoed through his mind. Everyone else saw weakness. Humanity saw a reason to fight harder. The heroine drifted through dead space, scarred but unbroken. Cale's body ached, every breath a reminder of the blood paid, every scar a ledger etched in pain. They were coming. Not just the Concordat's fleets this time, but every hunter, every predator, every shadow the galaxy had ever sent to snuff humanity's flame. The obelisk pulsed against Cale's spine, a cold, steady heartbeat syncing with his own. It whispered promises and threats, memories and warnings. You carry the past. You carry the future. But Cale carried more than that. He carried rage. The bridge flickered, sensors screamed. A fleet bloomed on the horizon, a constellation of death. Seriax, Cale rasped. Get the coalition ready. We're not dying in silence. Seriax's reptilian eyes gleamed with cold fury. They think we're weak. Kyle looked at the uneasy coalition behind him. Takali, empath. Reptilian tactician. Humans with grit carved deep in their faces. They were weak, but weakness had teeth. The enemy's first strike hit like thunder. Energy lances tore through the hull, ripping steel and flesh alike. The heroine shuddered. Cale's mind narrowed to a singular point. Survive. Endure. Burn brighter. They fought in brutal bursts, boarding skirmishes in the twisting corridors, plasma fire turning hallways into crucibles of agony. Hold the line, Cale shouted, voice raw but commanding. Amid the chaos, a message broke through encrypted channels. Not concordat, not rebel. A voice, human, desperate, cold. The obelisk isn't just power, It's a beacon. They're coming for all of us. Kale's heart froze. They weren't just hunted. They were the spark, the signal, flare. The galaxy was burning, and humanity was the match. In the final moments before breach, Kale faced a horrifying truth. Their unity was a fragile lie. Allies turned wary eyes inward. Fear whispered betrayal. Then, the blast doors exploded. Enemies flooded in, not to negotiate, but to exterminate. Kale fought with a fury no machine could contain. Blood and steel mixed. Pain became power, and in the heart of the storm, Kale's voice cut through the madness. They think they've broken us, but they don't know what it means to bleed and fight. The Harrowwind roared back to life. Systems surged. Shields flared. And Kale, scarred and burning, stood defiant. Because everyone else saw weakness. But humanity saw a reason to fight harder. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. Kale stood on the bridge of the Harrowwind, battered but unbowed. Around him, the remnants of a fractured coalition gathered, reptilian, human, empathic, and others, each scarred by war, each burning with a desperate hope. The Concordat's fleet spread across the void like a shadow of inevitability, ships numbering in the thousands, weapons charged to annihilate. But this time, the hunters would find no easy prey. Kale's eyes, hardened by 1,000 battles, scanned the void. The obelisk burned within him, not a curse but a forge. Every scar, every loss, every moment of pain was fuel. He turned to the council. "They think we're finished." His voice was quiet but fierce. "That this is the end of humanity's story," Sariax hissed beside him, claws tapping on the railing. "They underestimate what blood remembers." Kale's plan was madness, tactical genius born of desperation. The Harrowwind would not hide, it would not flee, it would ignite, a beacon in the dark, a flare that screamed to every corner of the galaxy, "We are not your ghosts." The battle erupted with brutal ferocity. Energy beams tore the void, echoing like thunder across shattered stars. Kale led the boarding squads himself, each step a defiance, every strike a promise. In the chaos, alliances held, broke, and reformed. Old grudges were swallowed by the greater fight. Jera's empathic light pulsed through the chaos, healing, guiding, anchoring the fractured spirits. But the true turning point was silent. Deep in the engine room, Kyle faced the heart of the Concordat's flagship, a living weapon of impossible power. The alien commander, arrogant and cruel, stood waiting. "You are nothing," it sneered. Kale's response was a cold smile. "I am what survives." They clashed, not just muscle and metal, but wills. Kale's resolve burned through the darkness like a star going nova. The obelisk flared violently, its glow engulfing Kale as memories of every fallen comrade. Every erased world surged through him. He didn't fight for victory, he fought for remembrance. With a final, desperate strike, Kale shattered the alien commander's weapon. The flagship faltered. Shields cracked. The Concordat fleet hesitated. Across the galaxy, systems flickered, messages, signals, survivors rising in defiance. A spark ignited. The hunters became the hunted. Kale stood tall amidst the ruin. Bloodied, broken, but unbroken, his voice echoed through comms. A rallying cry to every corner of the cosmos. "They erased our history, they burned our homes, they counted us dead, but everyone else saw weakness. Humanity saw a reason to fight harder. Stars did not blink, the galaxy did not yield, because we remember, because we endure, because humanity's rage is not just a fire, it is a legacy, and it will burn for 10,000 years more."